You from wherever you're tuning in from. Welcome to today's edition of Morning Prime. From wherever you're tuning in, I hope you had a fantastic weekend and you're ready to kickstart your week in style. It's Morning Prime, as I mentioned. My name is Jesse Rogers. It being a Monday, the 27th day of February 2023. We take a look at the latest political and governance issues emerging over the weekend, even as we talk about what you need to know in form of what's fresh off the press. We'll definitely take a look at some of the stories encompassed in today's dailies. With me, I have a couple of papers: The Standard, The Daily Nation, The Star, People's Daily, Taifa Leo, East African, you name it, we've got it. So we'll definitely keep you updated on what exactly is making the headlines, even as we take a look at the major political statements that have been uttered over the weekend and plug in on the latest governance matters. I'll get to introduce my guests a little bit later on, but allow me to take you through a couple of the top stories covered in today's dailies so you're adequately up to date and informed about what you can expect in today's edition of the dailies. I just want to start with what has been covered on today's edition of Kenya's bold newspaper, The Standard. And as you will see shortly on your screen, it's all to do with the big story of the day: 1 trillion shilling tax debt at heart of KRA purge. The 1 trillion tax debt is at the heart of the Kenya Revenue Authority purge. All to do with revenue strategy right there, where the chairman of Kenya Revenue Authority says they are going hammer and tongs against officials of former regime for failing to pay taxes and rewarding themselves illegal exemptions. This coming a few days after we saw the overhaul at the top management at the Kenya Revenue Authority. Just last Friday, we saw a couple of changes instituted by the appointing authority, President William Ruto. And perhaps this is just a follow-up from the chairperson of KRA right there. And we have a couple of quotes. In his own words, that's Anthony Mwaura, the board chair of Kenya Revenue Authority. He says we have about 1 trillion shillings from tax abandonment, exemption and refunds to undeserving individuals and firms. People think we're fighting a lost cause, but they will be surprised. In the words of the board chair of Kenya Revenue Authority, equally adding that there are farms dealing with milk and bread that were given 5 billion shillings tax refunds as late as last week. We are pushing Kenyans to pay taxes, and the KRA management were refunding people billions illegally. A lot more to talk about right there. But equally, President William Ruto quoted, "This country is not the animal farm where some are more equal than others. We're going to have a society where every citizen carries a fair share of our burden to raise their taxes." And of course, the Kenya Kwanza administration focusing on revenue collection and going ham, definitely raising awareness on those who are exempted from tax, mentioning that this won't be the order of business this time around. More details on page 4 of The Standard. On page 5 right there, under the national segment, Raila State House March is on as planned. We'll definitely be discussing about this, all to do with the mass effect of mass action, whether it's detrimental or whether it definitely serves a purpose. But according to page 5, the opposition leader says ban from traveling to the US will come between him and, or rather says the opposition leader says ban from traveling to the US will not come between him and the fight to lower the cost of living. More details on page 5 right there. The Standard definitely has you covered. At the bottom right there, the marvel of science, not ready to be a mother. Don't sweat the small stuff. Women have many reasons to delay pregnancy, for not having the right spouse, to financial stability. And with 500,000 shillings, you can safely harvest your eggs and store them safely for up to 10 years. The latest, all to do with the marvel of science, page 14 and 15 of The Standard. More details on that. And we'll definitely get to take a look at other stories covered on the Standard. On the national page, page 6, right there at the top, we have an excerpt on what you can expect on page 6. Governors take on control of budget over funds. More details covered on page 6. Even on the world pages, poll results from Nigeria expected soon. Nigeria definitely had their presidential and parliamentary election held, is it on the 25th of February? Definitely tallying their results, and the vote counting is underway. We'll definitely keep you updated on the latest from Nigeria. Covering Jill Biden first-hand account. More details on page 3 on that 3-day visit by the First Lady from the United States of America. Definitely talking big on the fight against drought, calling on humanitarian organizations to pull their weight and support Kenyans who are definitely reveling from the adverse effects of the prolonged drought that we are facing right now in the country. For the sports enthusiast, Kenya Shujaa stumble and fall yet again. Details covered on page 37 in the sports segment. Just a touch on what you can expect on Kenya's Bull newspaper, The Standard. There you have it. Allow us to shift focus right now to the Daily Nation so we can take a look at what has been covered on the front page of the Daily Nation. And this is the big story of the day. This is what you can expect as you grab yourself a copy of the Daily Nation. Exposed governors' bad spending habits. It's all to do with the devolved units, and the recurrent spending for governors right there has been put into question. Page 7 details how the quest for better roads, schools and hospitals remains a mirage as development is not a priority for counties, according to spending reports that expose little allocations for growth in the last 6 months. And on this, all 47 governors have violated the law and are guilty as charged right there. All to do with development and how it's not a priority for counties, according to the spending reports that expose little allocations for growth in the last 6 months. It seems the bulk of the monies is going towards recurrent expenditure. And we have a couple of governors right there. Find more details on what exactly is ongoing. Apologies for that, but there you have it. More details on what is ongoing in terms of the issues when it comes to counties and how they're supposed to pump 30% of allocations into development, but that is not happening. The bulk of the money going to recurrent expenditure and other issues. Bear in mind, the counties are equally facing the issue of pending bills. We'll get to discuss a little bit more about that because it definitely is in line with governance matters. As we continue with other stories encompassed in today's edition of the Daily Nation, Raila to West, don't meddle in our affairs. That's a message Raila is giving some of the Western actors right there. In page 4, we get more details as to the statements that were made by Raila over the weekend. Remember, Azimio La Umoja equally had Meet the People tour over the weekend, and we follow up on how the Azimio chief laughs off that particular plan by the West to block him from traveling due to the call for mass action and the countdown that is already ongoing. Was it a 14-day ultimatum by last week? We'll definitely see how that develops. Nigerians await as vote counting starts. Page 20 has more details on that. Vote counting is underway in Nigeria's tightest presidential election since military rule ended in 1999. Turnout appeared to be high, with many young first-timers voting in Saturday poll, marred by delays, reports of ballot box snatching, and attacks by armed men. Definitely a cause for concern right there. But as we well know, the vote counting is underway, and in a couple of days or so, we'll get to know who emerged victorious in the Nigerian election, the presidential election. And there you have it for the football enthusiasts. Page 39, Manchester United ends a trophy drought. I think the last time they won a trophy is 2017. So I'm sure the Man U fans are quite enthusiastic about that particular victory. Find out more on page 39 of the Daily Nation. That sort of encompasses some of the stories that have made it to the front page of the Daily Nation. Let's cross over to Taifa Leo so you can get adequately informed about the headline that has been covered on that particular end. This is what you can expect. Taifa Leo going big with the headline, Ruto awatetea mawaziri watalii. There you have it, Ruto awatetea mawaziri watalii. Rais asema ndiye huwatuma kwa safari hizo zenye gharama kubwa, akiongeza kuwa zitailetea nchi wawekezaji. A focus on some of the cabinet secretaries that have made numerous visits, foreign trips, even as they take care of their dockets. And there you have it, the cabinet secretaries on the spot. And it's all to do with the gharama. Baadhi yao wakiongozwa na waziri wa biashara na viwanda Moses Kuria wamezuru mataifa ya kigeni zaidi ya mara 15 katika muda wa miezi mitano pekee ya serikali ya Kenya Kwanza. Haya, ukurasa wa pili uko na maelezeo zaidi, more details on that particular page. Mahakama sasa yaona moto kwa uamuzi wake tata, all to do with that particular ruling that was passed with the LGBTQ in question. Makanisa sasa yaungana na Waislamu kupinga uamuzi wa kusajili kundi la mashoga, wakisema ni kinyume cha makusudi ya Mungu. Ukurasa wa pili una maelezo zaidi. Find more details on that particular issue. But there you have it. Those are some of the stories encompassed in Taifa Leo. Let's shift focus to the Star. This is what has been covered on the front page of today's edition of the Star. Raila boycotts a new IEBC selection panel, where he has snubbed the recruitment process. Azimio has refused to nominate one person to sit on the committee that is meant to select the next crop of IEBC commissioners. The opposition in Kenya Kwanza would have sent a name to make the full list of 7. Page 4 and 5 has more details on that. We'll get to discuss a little bit more about that with my panelists, who I'll get to introduce a little bit later on, even as they enjoy a cup of tea right now. Warn banditry. KDF bombs Samburu caves after bandits kill area chief. Quite an unfortunate turn of events right there. But military choppers have bombed caves before, rather believed to be hosting gunmen who have killed 3 people in Samburu over the weekend, as the new confrontation between state agencies and bandits continue. Witnesses say the choppers bombed parts of that area in Samburu and left a trail of destruction as they hunted the gunmen who are on the run with stolen animals. Well, a lot of questions whether this military approach will definitely solve some of the issues that are facing this bandit-ridden areas, roughly 4 or 5 counties right there affected. And we saw the military intervention a few weeks into it. What are the results? We'll definitely get to highlight some of them, even as we take a look at whether they're solving the socio-economic issues that arise when it comes to banditry. A lot more covered on page 2 right there. But that's what you can expect from the Star. Let's cross over to the East African just briefly, all to do with the developments happening in the East African region. This is what you'll find on the headline of the East African. Congo war will not be fought on Rwandan soil. President Kagame warns Kinshasa that it has crossed the red line by using FDLR to attack civilians, and Kigali will act at some point. Pages 4 and 5 have more details on that protracted sort of conflict between Congo and Rwanda. It hasn't come to arms, of course, but definitely exchange of words between the heads of state, even as one party accuses the other of meddling in its affairs. Biden's soft power, there you have a photo op of the First Lady of the United States, Jill Biden, when she was in the country, First Lady of Kenya, Mama Rachel Ruto, right there. And we have CS Miano, I believe, in that particular photo op right there, the East African Community CS. All to do with the just concluded trip by Jill Biden. Nairobi on the spot for edible oil duty waiver. Manufacturers accuse trade and treasury ministers of allowing duty-free imports against the EAC CET rules. More details right there covered on the East African. Last but definitely not least, the People's Daily. This is what you'll find on the front page. Why 3 million children are out of school. The cost of hunger is definitely out there for all to see. Lack of food and harsh weather conspire to deny learners a chance to improve their lives as parents actually seek free meals in school. And I think this story is sort of encompassing what we saw covered on one of the stories covered right here in the Standard, where KTN News actually highlighted that some parents in some of the drought-stricken areas are actually accompanying their children to school due to the free meals program. They hope to get a biting, especially during lunch hour, as they are not able to fend for themselves. Of course, we had from the school management mentioning that, you know, our food stuff will definitely finish before the planned time, and that's a cause of concern, but they cannot turn down the parents who are coming and are in dire need of assistance. So those are some of the details encompassed in today's edition of the People's Daily, including Raila's allies who say they're not afraid of sanctions by the West. That particular story covered on page 5 on the Newsbeat. And we've seen it feature prominently in today's edition of the Dailies, just reflecting on some of the words that were mentioned by the Azimio la Umoja coalition leader Raila Odinga over the weekend, perhaps as a reaction to what we saw at the AU, where his position was actually withdrawn. Whether he quit or whether it was withdrawn, that's a story for another day. But as it is, Raila definitely daring the West, even as he sticks to his guns on the matter of mass action. We'll get to interrogate that with my panelists. Allow me to introduce those who have already joined me, even as we expect another gentleman to join us a little bit later on. I'm joined by two professors. I'm spoiled for choice today, so I'll just go with Professor Yusuf Elmi, since you arrived a little bit earlier, and they say the early bird catches the worm. So let the worm be this introduction. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us. He's a political analyst and a former chancellor at Rongo University. How are you doing, sir?
Thank you, Rogers.
I hope you had a fruitful weekend.
Very fruitful.
Yeah.
Right from the rural area back to civilization.
Mashinani kukuaje?
Mashinani hiko mzuri sana, but there is a lot of problem. A lot of problem, particularly where I come from.
Yeah.
There's massive drought. All these things are, you know, as they look visible in the TV, but in reality, things are really, really terrible.
Yeah, it's a
and I think this is failure on social issue, because drought is not, drought emergency should not have created this level of hunger and starvation, because drought is something that comes every other time. It's like winter. So you must prepare for it. In a government that has been independent for the last, 40 years, then things like this is not right. But we have to learn to live with it and solve the problem as we see it today. Thank you, Rogers.
Okay. And perhaps we'll get into more of the interventions that are being done by either the county governments and the national government in some of the areas that have been affected. But on a good note, there's some areas that recorded rain last night. So we hope that the drought is not prolonged and the rain is forthcoming. Asante for your introduction, Professor Yusuf Elmi. Let's cross over to the other professor joining us in studio. I'm joined by Professor Fred Ogola. It's great to see you. He is a strategy and governance expert. I hope you had a great weekend. Karibu to our studios.
Yeah, a great weekend indeed. You know, Arsenal won by 1-0.
You're an Arsenal fan?
Yeah, I'm an Arsenal fan.
Okay.
So we are enjoying this moment.
Top
People are
of the
telling
table.
us that very soon we shall be out of the top table. But you know, you enjoy when it is last. Why are we expecting to come out of the top? Let's just enjoy that moment. And of course, the weekend was also full of so many things. I know Kenyans have so many issues, and you know, for us who are public, let's say public figures, we receive so much information how people are suffering here and there. So there's not too much to celebrate, I'm telling you, in Kenya at the moment. But of course, we cannot lose hope.
Exactly. And he mentioned that, that he was a chancellor at Rongo University. Yeah?
Yes.
I understand that's your home area.
Yeah, that's my home area. In fact, I'm feeling very privileged to be with him on the panel, of course. Then I know that when we are discussing things, he understands Mashinani, you know Mashinani? Yes, so that is very good, Professor, and I'm privileged to be in this panel with you.
Thank you.
Yes, that's great. Unajua, they say vitu kwa ground ni different, and I'm happy I have panelists who are in touch with the matters qua ground.
Yes.
So, gentlemen, let's get right to it, reflecting on the day's top stories. Let's begin on that particular note, perhaps starting with the front page of The Standard, where it's highlighted that 1 trillion shillings tax debt is at the heart of the KRA purge. More details have been covered on page 4 of The Standard right there, where intrigues in KRA purge as taxman seeks 1 trillion unpaid taxes. A lot has been mentioned when it comes to the collection of taxes right here in the country. And I'll start with you, Professor Ogola. Well, what do you make, first of all, of the changes that were instituted at KRA, a new Director General, including commissioners as well? But even as you react to that, what do you make of the tax waivers that seem to have been the order of the day in the previous administration, and President Ruto mentioning that wouldn't be the order of the day in this current administration?
Yeah, first of all, we have to look at it in two sides. If these ones were really things which were not deserving, the president and the KRA administration is right to go for that money. But the other question also we have to ask, is it real? Because this tax is not the first time we are talking about another thing. Because the first thing was the talks about the first family. There was some noise. It went quiet. We don't know how much money could be got from those taxes. We had about the issue of the tax of the estate. That went quiet. We never saw numbers. If you saw any numbers that came up, then you can tell me. Then now we are going for this one. You know, is it justifying the changes they have done at KRA? Or actually there is this 1 trillion that will come by? If this money was refunded, and if it was refunded to somebody by KRA, is it legal that you can get this money back? Because I'm sure they followed a legal process, though even if they played with officers in the KRA, I don't know. But the point is that if they follow a legal process to give this money undeservingly, is it deserving to get it back? Because you see, for example, once you're given somebody some right, you don't withdraw the rights. You let them stay with their rights. So is this just noise, or this is the signal? Now, when you're listening to a radio, even now you're listening to television, there's always the noise on the background, but there's the signal. What exactly is being said? Is it excuses for replacing Uhuru's staff with his staff, that they are now trying to say there's 1 trillion that is begging? But for me, the tax question, also the third question, if I may raise before I give Professor time to comment. Jesse, the main question here is, we are talking about this government of Kenya Kwanza talking about how much money they want to collect. They are talking about the economic growth they are going to bring. But one question we are waiting for is, where is this money going? Because I can tell you for sure, the President William Ruto is collecting more taxes than Uhuru did collect. Secondly, he has borrowed more in his 6 months, more than Uhuru ever borrowed. He has done away with all the infrastructural projects. 19 of them are now pending. He has tried to cut the budget. But where is this money going? Because what we are seeing is that his budget in State House is going up. The one regarding Gachagua is going up. He is trying to employ cars, which is unnecessary according to me. So Kenyans are asking themselves, what is the reason for paying taxes or even going after these people whom we are saying are defaulting on taxes if they don't see the benefit? Like Professor has said, the real issue on the ground is serious. People can't go to school. You see, even newspapers saying education is becoming hard. People can't go to school. Cost of fuel is up. Everything has gone up except income. Where is this money going? If you collect taxes, where are you taking taxes? And I just want to finish by talking about, there are two things, Jesse, to distinguish here. There's what you call economic growth. Economic growth is how much revenue the government can collect each and every year. You can collect more every year. That means there's growth. Economic development means, are you taking money to where it matters? Are you taking money to reduce cost of living? Are you taking money to ensure people can go to hospital affordably? Are you collecting money to increase literacy? Are you collecting money to increase primary, secondary, university transition? Because if guys can't see that happening, then that money is only yours. We don't know where you're taking it.
Interesting. And perhaps as you come in, Professor Elmi, it would be proper to note that President William Ruto's revenue mobilization plan, at least for the first 5 months in the current financial year, sort of fell short of the target, 32.2 billion shillings. That is the difference into the target and what was actually collected in the first 5 months by Kenya Revenue Authority. So do these changes actually, are they pragmatic from where you sit within KRA in order to boost revenue? And he raises a very important question when it comes to where exactly is this money going?
Rogers, thank you very much. I think there are two issues here. Yeah. And it's good to segregate them. One is illegal tax evasion, that you are supposed to pay tax and you have not paid as required by law. And the second one is where does the money go? And the third one is that this is a new administration. And I think every new administration is entitled to work with people whom they think can do things according to their manifesto. So I think in the first instance where the tax evasion was done without considering the economic factors of the country, and the tax evasion is actually a criminal offense. If it was done without following the right procedure, and if Mama Mboga is able to pay tax, however small it is, then I think for fellows in the KRA, the leaders of the KRA, to exempt themselves is really criminal, in my opinion. Number two, I think we can give the benefit of doubt for this regime today, because 5 months, 6 months is not long enough. And I think, you know, they are still at an infantile stage.
Okay.
And at an infantile stage, you may stumble a lot, fall in one place, but ultimately you will walk and gain some strength. So I think Ruto's government can be given that benefit today and say, okay, these guys are still young, where the money has gone. And you see, today we're in a very serious economic problem. There's massive drought. There's massive hunger in this country. So if the rich and the well-placed people in the government cannot pay tax, that is shame. And I agree with what the President is saying. This country should not be an animal farm where some are more equal than others. And you see, in the process, you see, the Hustler Nation came in through the phenomena of assisting the local man. The man, the Mama Mboga, the Boda man, and you know, those fellows who are at the bottom. And this bottom can only go up if there are sufficient resources. So collection of tax should only be an exemption where there is the economic benefit outweighs the collection of the. For example, if there is a merchant who is bringing massive employment to this country, or bringing massive technology or resources to this country, then an exemption for a period of time is allowed. And of course, I think there are structures.
Okay, of course.
Yeah, there are structures that deal with tax exemption. The problem in this country is not, we have not divisions of resources. There is massive resources, there are massive laws to follow. Everything is available. What is lacking is implementation. What is lacking is impunity.
What is lacking is impunity.
No, I mean, what is lacking is the
accountability.
Accountability.
Okay.
That is, you steal, you get away with it.
Okay.
So somebody else steals it because, you know, Ogola has been allowed to steal, then tomorrow it is Helmi. So the idea here, I think, tax collection is a very, very important. It will free us from this massive, you know, begging bowl syndrome, where every time you go to the West or any other country, nisaidia, serikali saidia, serikali ingine inauliza ingine saidia. This saidia process can only end if we collect our tax well. And this tax must be used well, as the professor says.
And as you come in equally, we're talking about accountability, and there's so much talk in terms of making sure there's no wastage within Kenya Revenue Authority. You know, making sure that money collected indeed goes to the intended recipient, as you perhaps put it in a different way. Are we doing enough to seal these loopholes?
First of all, to start with that, KRA is not the one that spends money. Actually, KRA is an institution hired by the government to help me and you comply in tax payment. So it's just like, let's say, one of the parastatals under the government to deliver the mandate. Now, the money after that goes to the treasury. Now that's where after that, in that common pool, is where money is spent. So KRA does not have anything to do with how they spend their money. Actually, they do the right thing. Yeah. After that is when now money handed over to treasury, how now money is spent. So for sure, there are no clear way. For example, you see the president has been doing some things, creating some funds without appropriation from parliament. For example, the Hustler Fund. I went to court and challenged the president against it. I even went to court to stop the board that was already appointed from taking oath of office. The court agreed with me, and the judges cannot take oath of office because the fund for 50 billion Kenya shillings, already he has spent over 30 billion to people without appropriation. The budget controller cannot account for where is this money coming from and where is it going. So the institutions are not made. Now, to the other point that he mentioned before by saying, I disagree a little with the professor. I know professors can disagree because the so-called schools of thought are different. When he said that the president is having the right, the new government has got the right to replace the other people with their people. Just say, would you know what to live in a country whereby when there's a change of presidency, your job is not a threat? I would like us to move to a situation whereby institutions and functions are the main focus, not people. I would like to find a place whereby we have KRA that will do their work irrespective of who is the president. I remember when Trump, if you want to know Kenyans the value of institutions, Trump proved to Americans the value of having the strong institution they had. Because Trump didn't want to leave office. The military went and told him, we swear allegiance to the Constitution, not to the individual. So please leave office as soon as possible. We shall act when it comes. And that made Trump just take Air Force One and leave Washington. If we are having institutions, for example, KRA, we go to control our budget. We go to judiciary, independent institutions, which was meant, remember, most of the commission's name begin with the word independent, and they are not independent. They are institutions that can be manipulated. When institution will be strong, it will control individuals. When individuals control institution, what is the point? Because individuals, you know, human beings left to their own, they can be very messy. They can do the wrong thing left, right, and center. But with strong institutions, let us not do that. In fact, now, look at the replacement which has taken place. There are boards. For example, I have friends of mine from Mombasa crying. I was in the ICT board. I have been replaced without degazettement, even following the due process, Professor. We need to see these things happening whereby everybody feels protected, to feel Kenyan, that anybody changing on top there does not change my fate. And that's why you see people, immediately after the election, people are moving from this coalition to that coalition, going state house because it is individual. We are worshipping individuals. Let us not worship individuals. But let us focus on the strong institutions.
Okay, and Professor perhaps might raise and mention that, I mean, we're talking about an appointing authority who doesn't need any reason or explanation to switch. It's within his powers, number one. Number two, he mentioned that you need someone who will implement your vision, whether it's a Kenya Kwanza manifesto, bottom-up economy. Don't you need to put people in these offices that believe in that dream?
That's where my main thing is.
Okay.
If we are qualified,
yes.
Just look at. I have done analysis by looking at the number of years of the cabinet of President William Ruto, the number of years they have spent in school. It is almost half the number of years that was spent in school by Uhuru cabinet. Are we embracing meritocracy or not? You're a professor, you're in school. Look here. The most developed country in terms of human development index, where life is best, is Norway. The average number of years people spend in school is 17.5 years. In Kenya, we are doing 11.6. Now, it shows that there's a high correlation between the number of years spent in school and good life. In Kenya, if you take someone who was a professor in charge of education, then you take someone who is a question of whether they have masters or not to be in charge of education, is this a good replacement? We should be talking about progress, not retrogress. So I'm not questioning the qualification of those people, but you can go for yourself and check. Some of them had corruption cases. Then you're telling me they are going to turn around KRA. So what I'm trying to say here, Professor, if you analyze that thing objectively, you know, for me, the advantage is that I don't need appointment from this government. I am a professor. I'm satisfied with eating chalk. And the first thing that will help us Kenyans, it is to be satisfied with your job. If I chose to become a professor of eating chalk, I should not look for another handout. So I'm trying to say clearly, my brother, let us strengthen institutions. Institutions will remove personality attack by discussing now Ruto, Raila. Do you know why every year you open the newspaper from since began independence is about a person? Either Raila is there, or Ruto is there, or Uhuru is there, or Kenyatta is there. Why are we not seeing headlines of institutions which are bringing governance and accountability? And then my last point before I finish, because again, briefly, the other thing I said, he said that the government is still new. They are 6 months into office. That is 10% of his presidency. They are still young. When will they grow old? Because the point is this year is going to end. By the time we reach August, we have already clicked 1 year, remaining 4 years. So let me tell you what. I agree with the fact that we can take time, give them time, isn't it? They asked for a 100 days plan. They have not executed that 100 days plan. I'm just following their manifesto. They made promises to that. And then telling us the economy is bad, he was deputy president. He knew how the economy was performing. If he didn't know, then there was a problem, which means Kenyans employed him as deputy president. He didn't deliver his mandate. I'm just questioning those things. And then lastly, there is always a stroke of genius of any new president. Kibaki had his stroke of genius. He was in a wheelchair, after a accident to announce free primary education. And the economy turned on the head. Which genius decision have you had William Ruto make? Since he was sworn in, I've only had excuses. Mara, economy is dilapidated. Mara, my predecessor made a mistake. And just I can tell you, even Obama, when he became president, immediately there was global financial crisis. He came with what he called tech manufacturing. Trump, when the economy was bad, he came with bring jobs back to the US. That was a very clear statement. Which one have you had from William Ruto? I want Professor to tell me which one are you waiting to work? Because as I watched football yesterday, when I saw this guy called Martinelli given a cross, his first touch showed me he was going to score. So which touch has William Ruto made that will show us he's scoring? But if he's making wrong touches, by blaming people, and if you become now, if you be made MD now of Standard Group, I'll tell you a strategy to survive. First of all, blame your predecessor by mismanaging Standard Group for the rest of the years. After 2 years, blame the economy. After the 3rd year, blame the staff. Then they renew your term. After that, now you can do what you want with the new term because that's your last term. If they fire you, they'll give you money for having given wrongful dismissal. So let us not have excuses. Just say the person dying of hunger is dying now. The person sleeping outside is sleeping now. The kid who can go to school who have wasted 1 year is not in school today. As we are giving you time, Mheshimiwa, I don't think that's fair.
Okay, interesting. And how do you comment before we introduce our other panelists, just briefly?
I think the professor is slightly emotional.
Is he not factual?
These are emotive issues.
But what we are discussing here is whether this removing these fellows for tax evasion is right or wrong. We are yet to come to the policies of, whether what Ruto has done and what the Kenya Kwanza government has done. All these things are things that we are going to discuss later. But the critical component here is these fellows have not been able to account for 1 trillion. 1 trillion is a lot of money, my brother.
Okay.
If this amount of 1 trillion Kenya shillings is given to the people of Northeastern today, I think hunger will be a thing of the past. So we are looking at, should they have collected this money? And if they haven't, then was it right for the government? The government is not necessarily the president, right to bring these fellows. Then the other thing is, we are not looking at, there's nothing that has shown that the procedure followed to remove these fellows was either illegal or unconstitutional. There's nothing that has come to the fore. That removing these fellows from the KRA, actually, I think it was in the paper of the other day, it said that they resigned voluntarily or something like that. So whether there was pressure or not, we don't know.
Yes.
What we know in a public domain is these guys left on their own volition.
But remember what happened with, what's his name, the former DCI Kinoti.
Yes.
We heard that he had resigned. Later on in an interview, the president mentioned that he indeed dropped the axe on the former DCI. So we might take this resignation
let's wait until the
with a little
president
bit of
says.
contempt.
Let's wait until the president says
Okay.
that actually this guy, he is all who asked them.
Sure.
But for now, for what is in our domain as civilians outside and as Kenyan citizens, is that these fellows left on their own volition.
All right.
Number two, what is on the table is, was it right for them to have...
There's a word purge. KRA purge. That is not voluntary.
Okay, so whether it's voluntary or not, that's neither here nor there. Okay.
And the critical component is that this tax evasion is a criminal activity.
All right.
Whoever does it,
Yes.
whether it is the president, whether it is a simple man from Bolajogo in my village, and that our issue here in this country is that we want to be economically independent from donors, from all. In fact, we should be donors ourselves because the resources in this country is immense.
Okay.
So how this money will be used by this regime is something that we will have to question, all of us. We cannot give Ruto, a clean, a blank check to write whatever he wants. And I think there are certain institutions to guide all of them. If that institution fails, it's still 5 years.
All right, all right.
We can still remove him.
I like the word institution because he's talking about institution, again, individualizing. Because if there was a strong institution, we would trust him with the money.
But
Interesting.
Just let me add a little bit.
Allow me to introduce our panelists so you can equally join into the conversation.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your time, Gigi Kagombe, who is the Member of Parliament, Gatundu South. You've just walked in as we were having a deliberation on that particular headline that we can see on our screens right now. 1 trillion shilling tax debt at heart of KRA purge. And of course, it raises a couple of issues. And perhaps you will indulge us on your take on these other issues. When it comes to what the professor mentioned, meritocracy versus rewarding political loyalty. We've seen a couple of changes, not just in KRA, but equally in various state positions, including the CS position that many have been shortlisted, but only roughly, is it 24? Will actually get that position. What would you say about the process of hiring and firing by the Kenya Kwanza administration? Are they more into loyalty? Are they more into meritocracy? And to what cost?
There was a time when we were discussing whether members of parliament need to have a degree or not. And then we said, and the court ruled that you do not need a degree to hold such a seat. Why? Because we have something we call representation. And representation, the professor, the learned professor here, who happens to have gone to school like I have, may be well learned, but he may not represent a lot of us because we are not, all of us are not professors. And our issues, I cannot go and represent people from Northeastern because I don't understand their issues the way he does. The same way, a professor who comes from a minority of Kenyans cannot represent a lot of us because they don't understand the issues on the ground. Same thing. There is no law that is broken by appointing Mwaura to be chairman of KRA. If there is a law, we take it to court. This thing you're calling loyalty, that is a Kenyan who has been given responsibility to serve. But now professor comes and tells us, no, you cannot appoint him because he's a loyalist and he doesn't have a, he doesn't have a PhD like me. So please, what is qualification? The first qualification is to be a Kenyan, to deal with issues of Kenyan. So, and what is qualification? Having a PhD? We have seen fellows with PhDs who cannot run countries, all right? Who cannot run institutions. I mean, you're not telling me that everybody who has ruined this economy, because this economy has been ruined, that everybody has been, you know, not educated, from four, liver, or those are people. Okay. Secondly, you cannot run a government by people who you cannot trust. Even right here, the first thing for you to be employed here, you must show some loyalty to this company. You cannot be employed by this company and you're working for the competition. So first of all, you must appoint people to positions. For you to work, you must appoint people that you trust, that you know, I will tell you, we go this direction, and they will help you execute your mandate. All right? So as for loyalty, loyalty cannot be taken to be just something. It is important in every organization, even where I come from, even in my office. I cannot leave. I am here. I'm not in the office, but there are people who are being served in my office. Are you telling me that I now come and say qualification is I go to the university and ask for the most qualified person or the person with most degrees and then I employ them? No. The person in my office is not the person with the most degrees. It's person that I know I can give instructions and they're going to execute. All right? Number two, the person who left before Mwaura came in, because, you know, we're talking about KRA, is a person who's been in this government for very long, and even other governments, right? This purge that you're talking about, and you have used the RAD purge, I mean, I don't think it came from, it's not quoted, so this is a choice. this is a media house that has chosen that choice. And it is okay, because that is the work of the media house, right? Yes. This purge has been instigated by the previous regime. Because, I mean, this whole thing came as a result of what the previous regime did. If you ask a professor here, he will tell you that, you know, the person who sat on that seat was very qualified because he had been in government for many years. But we saw, you know that this is public knowledge, that we had some transactions happening by people who do not deserve any tax evasion and tax breaks and tax holidays, and they're just given just because they can, because they have access. And we've been saying, you know, it is very easy to sit in opposition and just say things. And, you know, there's something we call the prerogative of the harlot, power without responsibility. And it is so easy for you to wear a suit and just come here and say, oh, you know, this government is not doing this, because nobody's going to ask you anything. When you say that, because I just had Professor here saying, and I look at Professor and wonder, now you, Prof, before you start castigating, you know, it is very easy to get a lesson from him about how to run a country, only for you to realize that even that chalk that he says he eats, he probably doesn't eat it properly. He doesn't even, you know, you find people in the streets telling you.
Let's not be personal here now.
No, it's not about Prof. No, it's not about Prof.
Okay.
Prof is
Give
my
him
friend.
time.
You know, there's someone who said that the problem with us is that you go to the streets and you find people talking about governance. And you find this person is by the roadside making tea. And now he's telling you, no, you know, this is not how to run a country, this is what you do, this is what you do. Only to run, only for you to realize that even they cannot make good tea.
But what do you make of a vibrant opposition? Isn't the role of the opposition to hold those in government to account?
I just said, it is so easy to be in opposition. You know, you've been in opposition before.
That's totally fine.
You've been in opposition before. I mean, and Prof will tell you, when we were coming to government and when we were coming to parliament, it was so easy. You just sit and castigate the people in power.
But you provide alternatives.
But you see, and that is what we've been saying, and that probably will take us to the next question of how we ended Parliament in the last session. And you know, I called for for the suspension of the debate that we had because we did not have quorum, and we were discussing something very important. And we were talking about the changes that we may instigate. Because we're saying, even this opposition, while you oppose, our constitution seems to have a break somewhere. That opposition doesn't seem to be a legal entity. That it is not governed by any law. That just because you're in opposition, then you can just do anything you want, you know? You can decide to do maandamano, you can wake up today and say we are going to Jivanji, tomorrow we are going to Jacaranda, the other day we are going to stop all operations around IEBC and do prayers by the roadside, you know those things. You know, opposition also needs to operate to be anchored in law. From a position of law. Okay. And being in opposition does not give you the right to just do whatever you want or to say whatever you want. And you know, for every right, there is a limitation. True. Right? True. So even as you oppose the government, provide alternatives, but also act within the law.
You know, it's right. Yeah. It's the right to picket. I just had to highlight that.
Yeah, anyway, so my response is this. First of all, welcome, my brother, to the panel. At the same time, you are just falling prey to what I've said. Let's focus on institutions and functions, and we will not see individuals too much. Everybody needs to feel Kenyan and needs to feel that they are protected by institution, not by individual. Our life should not depend on William Ruto. So I'm sure, Mheshimiwa, you've gone to the West and the rest. Sometimes I was living in Spain, I was living in Europe, election is taking place, I'm not even aware. Because it is depersonalized. There's a commission doing it, there's no much hullabaloo about it. In Kenya, if you have to become president, you even have to know, how will I be sworn in? In some countries, you just win the election and you will be told, now, take this one. You don't have to control things. But I'm saying that is what I'm dreaming as a Kenyan, because I believe in institutions. Then when he talks about the issue of members of parliament representation, then he goes to technocrats. I think that's a false analogy, because as a technocrat, my work is not to represent the people of KRA. My work is to execute the mandate. It doesn't matter how much I come from, which part. The issue is that do I know the mandate of KRA and do I execute it? So we have to distinguish between loyalists and sycophancy, because sometimes we tend to take sycophants to be loyalists. I'm sure if you have your assistant in the office and there's something they need to give you as advice, and they cannot give that advice, fire them even if they are loyal to you, because they're not giving you any service or value. Then I have to again go and tell him that let's look at three things which are important in this thing. All right. Just say, between qualification, experience, and performance, which one will you give more prominence? Obviously, performance is superior to experience, and experience is superior to qualification. And therefore, I am looking at all these things. The one who was removed before Hulu left office, I'm not here for the president. Me, I've never met him. We never even talked. And at least you come from his constituency. This guy superseded the target from KRA. Is it not true? Now, we are saying KRA did not meet its target. So the person who made us supersede the target for KRA is being removed, and that is his last year, because last year he overmet his target. Now he's being removed for having overmet his target, being replaced with somebody else. So what I can say, let's wait and see at the end of the year whether the new person will actually deliver the target. That's the way to look at it. So me, I thrive on first, performance, second, experience do you have, and thirdly, qualification, because we have so many people who are qualified that cannot do anything that is right. And then lastly, on the opposition thing, you know, you're a member of parliament, Mheshimiwa, but we have to be privy that even us who are a professor, you say, I may not eat chalk properly. That is a situation my boss will evaluate. But when I go to the point here, is that the current constitution has not contemplated opposition. That's why we have minority and majority. When he says we are in government, he's a member of parliament. No. You are part of government as member of parliament, isn't it? Yeah. And in the member of parliament, there is no opposition. There is minority and majority. Because before, we are under pure presidential system. We are not under parliamentary system. Yeah. So in this matter, it's very clear that we have to know that Raila is not the leader of opposition. Actually, Raila is having a position that does not really exist by the Constitution, isn't it? Maybe you can say he is a head of civil society, because that position is having, which was what is his name? I see people say former prime minister. Prime minister position no longer exists. So let's be honest that the only person we have in parliament, or leader of majority, leader of minority, if Raila wants to do real good activation, because I'm also not agreeing with him going to the street, let him use his leader of minority. There are constitutional ways to stop the IBC. All these things can be done in parliament, and we should be, Kenyans who love the constitution and follow the powers of the institutions and functions of government. If we are law-abiding citizens, that's the only way we can actually go somewhere. But by everybody waking up and saying, me, I can now oppose Ruto. No, you can go to court like me, I went to court. I can't go to State House by saying, I want you out of State House. He is there legitimately, and I cannot have other ways to remove him from State House. But if I have ways to go to court, I can put a bill in parliament, maybe through you, Mheshimiwa. If there's something you're not happy with, follow the legal process and obey the institutions and constitutions and functions that we have in this country. I was born in Kenya. I fed as a Kenyan using the Kenyan constitution. I went to school using the Kenyan constitution. I cannot one time now start looking for other ways which are against the Kenyan constitution that I want to fulfill my end. They may be unfair, but let me just follow the unfair process, because that's how I've been fed until now I'm 40.
Okay, interesting. And gentlemen, allow us to take a short break before we get to your reservations or your views on what has been raised so far. So